We have finished chapter 17. I think we are in this 3 chapters or 4 chapters from 18th, 19th, 20 and 22, or at least 21. 18, 19, 20, 21. 4 chapters trace the evolution of loose organic social units into rationalized units. What he is trying to trace is, first, the growth is from small to big collectivities, that is one. And the movement is from loose organic collectivities into natural, loose and organic collectivities before they became now what we know as organized nation units. They have had to pass through a natural state. A natural organization was there, but it was spontaneous, you can say instinctive in a certain sense. Vitally instinctive organization of collective life is now or has now given place to conscious and rational organization of collective life. So that the collectivities now are trying to become more conscious and trying to govern the life by logical reason or rational intelligence. What they are trying to do is to become self-conscious collectivities from a loose, organic and natural organization into a rationalized condition. That is the process. Well, that if you understand now, then the 3 chapters or 4 chapters will be easy to follow. If you otherwise, you will see why he is saying this and why he is saying that and so on. But the main proposition which is trying to work out is that till the age of reason came into being, the collectivities were there. The age of reason has not created collectivities. Collectivities before did exist, and they were moving on a natural, organic, sort of instinctive life of their own. And it is now slowly giving place to rational, self-conscious organization of collective life. Well, that is the proposition now. Well, that will give some clarity about the whole thing. Because we are trying to find out the principle of world unity. Remember, the whole problem will be at last how to arrive at world unity. And he is trying to show how these collectivities themselves evolved. Now, we have seen that in world unity or unity of mankind, a free grouping is necessary. And we have seen that nation is the unit for creating free grouping. It is on the nation as a unit that the free grouping could be created. And there has been a change in the character of imperial groups or imperialism, character of colonies, to turn them from mechanical into psychological units. The effort has been to turn, change the character of imperialism and colonialism by creating psychological units, and they may serve as halfway house. You see, these units that are formed, like Commonwealth or the French Entente or the Arab League, you can say, or even the NATO or the Organization of European, continent on Europe on a political basis. Well, that might serve as halfway house to that unity which might be coming. Now, that would be the formation, that is to say, some kind of loose and supranational units, supranational units, some kind of formation of them has become necessary, and that would be loose, beginning of world union. That would be a very vague and loose beginning of world union. Once the idea has germinated, it is likely to experience a drive towards centralization and uniformity. This is the inevitable consequence of anything that becomes self-conscious in this present, state of man's evolution. Anything that becomes, conscious, immediately the effort is to use mind and reason. And then its dictate is to make unity and uniformity. This is, you can't escape, you see. So he says that the drive will be towards centralization and uniformity. And we have seen this in the formation of nation unity itself as an inevitable tendency in any effort at establishing unity. It may be economic, military, political, or administrative, but some kind of centralization or all departments centralized would be the movement. The world is now ripe for democracy and socialism. Why? Because the collectivities are now becoming self-conscious societies. They were natural organic units. They are trying to become now self-conscious societies. That is to say, they are trying to become free, self-regulating collective organisms. That is what they are trying to become. Free, self-regulating collective organisms. That is the effort. And there are many possible forms of collective life which have been seen and tried: theocratic state, autocratic state, plutocratic, aristocratic, monarchical, dictatorial, and so on. Well, they have been found to be, they have seen that out of that, democratic form is found to be the best. It is best in the sense of not perfect, because human being himself is perfect and imperfect, and he cannot create a perfect constitution out of his imperfection. Therefore, democracy is not best because it is perfect, but it is out of the imperfect possible political constitutions. Well, a democracy is the best selectable, best that could be chosen. It's not the last word, he says, but it is the standing ground for organizing collective life, a standing ground for the collective consciousness, on which standing it can then organize itself into some sort of perfection that it can envisage in the mind. Another reason for the choice of democracy is that no single individual can determine the evolution of a rational and a self-conscious society. However great that individual may be, it is impossible for him to decide the course of collective evolution of a whole group. Because so many forces have to be counted, and so many group interest, group psychological factors have to be taken into consideration. It's not one man. And he says almost that it is a sort of monstrosity, but it has happened in history. People have spoken for the whole race and decided like that. It has never worked. It has never worked. You see, he has given the instance of Charlemagne and other dictatorial people who actually brought about great changes because they, to some extent, embodied the collective life and dictated a course for a certain time or gave expression to something that was needed by the collectivity. But no individual can lay down the course of evolution of the collectivity, however great it may be. That no individual can determine the evolution of a rational and self-conscious. You could decide when society was not self-conscious. Nobody was thinking. Then a king came and thought, or a theocracy came and thought, aristocracy came and thought for them and say, how can they know? They are fools. They have no sense. They have no consciousness. We know what is good for them. Well, in one sense, it was at that time right. But it won't work. You see, when the society has become self-conscious and rational, it will not work. At the time when people were not conscious, somebody thought for them, of their good, and probably was right in thinking, and what he gave was good for them also. But in a self-conscious and a rational society, it would be different. Of course, it would be different. The masses had not awakened and reason had not permeated social strata. Then you could have dictated, you see, and one man could have thought at least a century or two ahead of the times of the masses. But otherwise, one of the most important part of democracy is to train the masses to do the work which democracy requires of them. And this work democracies are not doing because they are organizing themselves on party lines. You see, their one main function should be to educate the electorate. They don't. They educate the electorate on party lines. They don't make the man in the street, the common man, the voter, conscious of his responsibility as a part of the, nation unit, part of the conscious, state, that you are responsible for what those people are doing, and that in that you have to think not in terms of your interest, group interest, or even national egoism, but on some general principle of how ultimately unity of mankind is to come into being. Well, if the man is not trained, the voting takes place on absolutely basis which are not at all, to say the least, rational. The voting never takes place on rational basis, and then democracy, as expected to work, does not function. They had no. Yes, one of the most important parts of democracy is to train the masses to do the work which democracy requires of them, and democracy can bring about this conscious and organized unity. Socialism also can bring about a fundamental equality. These two forces, democracy and socialism, are a sign of the growth of self-consciousness, one. And secondly, the application of reason or rationale to the solution of collective problems. These two, democracy and socialism, point to the fact that collectivities have become self-conscious and that they want to solve their problem, well, logically or rationally. That is a sign. Socialism and democracy both give you the proof that the collectivity has become self-conscious. It has gone out of the state of natural organic collective life or organic guidance, and it is becoming now self-conscious and rational or logical. The force which is available is how these two forces are to work. What they have is desires, passions, and interests of the masses, half enlightened, and reason also half awake. And there are therefore confused experiments, recoils, resistances, rival ideas, clashes, and through that some working of this conscious awakening of the masses is taking place. It seems to move only by necessity and convenience. The whole progress seems to be by compulsion, some sort of need. You see, and what happens to be most convenient. That's how. There is no rational guidance yet capable of directing the course of collective life towards a goal which is approved of, to say the least, by majority or by all. You see, that is not yet taking place. It is taking place under the pressure of necessity and convenience. In determining the evolution of unity, race, language, and economic forces are powerful. But the decisive element is psychological factor which dominates, you see. In determining the evolution of unity, how far unity will be realized by a group, well, will depend. Of course, there is a race element. You see the Indians here and the Americans, or you go anywhere else, the Mongolians and the others, you see. Immediately, you see the race element is there, language is there, and economic forces are there. They are to some extent determinant, but the dominant factor is psychological. They may differ in race and yet agree. He has given the instance of Switzerland, for instance. There is tremendous difference of language, 3 languages obtaining in one country. And there are other parts, Latin and Teuton, German, French, and Italian language at the same time, you see. And yet the unity is there. So that these are strong factors. In the same way, he has pointed out in many other countries. I give you one instance because I want to save time. Now, therefore, we take up the 19th chapter next that follows. This is the drive towards centralization and uniformity. There is a drive towards centralization and uniformity now. Steps in the formation of one world or one union of the world. It will have almost to follow identical difficulties which the nation unit has gone through. In principle, the nation unit before formation had to go through various difficulties. We have seen that, you see, how even king's absolute authority had to come to centralize the whole thing. Then again, authority had to be overthrown by the bourgeoisie or the common man coming to his own and asserting his rights and so on, you see. So we have seen how the nation unit had to pass through several stages in its evolution. He said the unity of mankind might have to pass through identical difficulties in essence. Not similar steps outwardly, but in essence, if not in form. For instance, there would be drive towards centralization that was in the nation unit. When nation unit was formed, there was a drive towards centralization and uniformity. When the king or monarchy or somebody came to power and simply put the whole thing together. Now that also might come in the formation of world union. When the world union or unity of mankind comes into being, this drive towards centralization and uniformity would come. administration and control of foreign affairs of nations, which is already partly taking place, and we said 40 years ago. Unity towards of mankind would try to make for unity and uniformity. And in that centralizing tendency, administration and control of foreign affairs of other nations by the Central World Union, whatever comes into being. You see, they would try to influence the foreign policy, which they do. Not meddle so much in the internal administration. And what is the sense, we may ask, of human unity? In fact, this is a question. Would it be welding of mankind into a single nation? That is, this centralization might go to the extent of trying to make of whole humanity one nation. Because that is the trend of centralization. You see, logical consequence of it would be, well, the suppression of all nationalities. Yes. Is it that? Which it would mean that there must be a central world state then in that case. If it is to be world nation, then it must be world state, isn't it? Centralized world state. Or do we want, or rather a world union of free nationalities? So he is putting this question, whether this drive towards centralization and uniformity should be allowed to go in which direction? In creation of one nation of the whole human race, or in that will ultimately mean world state. You see, because each nation, when it administers, creates its own state, isn't it? Well, see, if the world becomes one nation, humanity becomes one nation, it will create world state. Or do we rather want to have, he says, union of free nationalities? A union of free nationalities. You see, in the one, the rational and the vital drive will be prominent. Collection of worlds, creation of world state. In the formation of free union of nationalities or nations, there will be a greater soul and psychological factor at work, which is really the soul of unity. It is not this, outward machinery that is important, but creation of an inner entity, inner truth, inner sense of unity is necessary. Not administrative effectivity or efficiency. Efficiency is not the only factor in man's life, collective life either. So that what he is pleading for is not to be carried away by the external show of efficiency which a world state might promise at first sight. But the fulfillment of the soul of the nation is more possible when there is a free federation of nations, you see. Can perfect unity be realized by uniformity? That is second question. Does unity means always uniformity? It seems that as civilization progresses, the trend towards uniformity also increases. More and more uniformity is imposed as culture seems to advance. Take Turkey, for instance, he says. They realize their nationality by imposing national uniformity. See, all the Greeks were out, all the other elements that were out first. By national uniformity, you must be Turk by nationality, you see. And then by adopting social forms of European culture, adopting all the social forms. United States has a device of the Supreme Court to nullify any legislative interference with the original constitution. There you find that imposition of uniformity is there, you see. More centralization means weakening of the federal principle. If you centralize more, the principle of federation was that all should have some sort of equality, some sort of freedom left to them. Otherwise, there was no meaning in federation. There could have been a centralized authority, one state only. The meaning of allowing different units to exist was that they have a function to perform, they have something to fulfill there, they have a task. Well, more centralization would mean weakening of federal principle. For example, if military centralization takes place, then you find that very great, powerful, unit emerges like, well, you can say centralized Japan. A military centralization took place, well, it gave tremendous power to Japan. Against that, you see, when China was faced, it was decentralized. And you see the weakness of decentralization. A decentralized big country is ineffective against centralized small country, isn't it? That is effectivity of centralization. He's pointing out that this is effective, but it would nullify the psychological principle if it is allowed to take place on the world scale. Then we come to he is trying to show the limits of applying centralizing and uniformity tendency in formation of collective life as applied to the evolution of world union, the world union of the whole world. And he is pointing out by referring constantly to its working out in nation units, how it has worked out in nation units, thus you can see how it is likely to work out in the world union. In the 20th chapter takes us to the idea of legislative power, you see, the legislature. And this brings us to the principle of sovereignty. In a state or in a nation, who is the sovereign? Who has the sovereign power? Sovereignty resides in what? Well, this question has been put. And in the beginning, when the nations were not yet self-conscious and not rationally organized, the power was there, but it was subconscious. It was left to play of forces of life, organic, natural forces. Sometimes it was a king, sometimes it was a leader, sometimes it was an aristocracy, sometimes an intelligent group who was intelligentsia or aristocratic, who represented the soul of the people, and so on. It was not one constituted authority constitutionally brought into existence. There was no constitution. Constitution is a result of reason coming out to the surface and governing, you see. There was no written constitution in many countries of the world. Even some of the countries which are regarded highly developed and cultured, there was no constitution, no written constitution. Its written constitution comes only when self-conscious, life in the collectivity becomes self-conscious. Now, there was no conscious legislature in the beginning. And sign of sovereignty is power to legislate, power to pass a law. That is a sign of sovereignty. Where has this sovereignty remained? Power to make laws for the group life, for the country, or for the people. Before, means in ancient times, the group is generally always behind the highest individual of the collectivity. You see, the highest man of the collective life is much forward than the group life. Group is always behind. You see, group life is always behind. It is far behind the highest individual. And you find that when state is organized, nation gives rise to the organization of state. And the state has main function is legislation. There was no legislation before. There were laws which were customs. Customs were the laws. You see, prevailing usage, what was being done by usage. Well, there was no written law. But we have seen that for 100 years this has not happened. Therefore, 110th year it must not happen. That's how it was, you see. He has given the instance of Latin, of Greek, and all the constitutions. He has given the names of those, original, parentage from which the present constitution have emerged. Wittenagemot in England, for instance, village panchayats in India, was groups of villagers who decided by usage. Not by a written law, but said, no, but in this village or in this part, something like this has not happened. Therefore, if this man has done it, no, not allowed. So that's all. There was no law. Custom was there. So the growth was law. In place of law, there was only habit and habitual behavior, habitual actions. It was called achar. You see, practice, what you call practice, custom. or institution based on that custom or practice. An institution, practice or institution. And then comes conscious law. You see, in ancient times there were no constitution. The authority was there, but the authority was not centralized like this. And even centralized authority was not rational and self-conscious. Supposing the king was given the centralizing power, either he was elected or he was hereditary, and his freedom was strongly restricted by very often a free hand in foreign policy, but in the main functions of the state, which means three functions: financial, executive, and official. The state has, over and above foreign policy, state has within its own rights finances, execution, and official work, representing itself as an entity, so to say. Well, these three functions, the king was not absolute in ancient times. And whenever fight came really for the sovereignty, it was on the question of power over the purse. They left him free for foreign policy sometimes, and very often, the people were forced into a fight or a peace, not knowing what was, because they didn't want to bother about the details. They knew that the foreign policy will be governed by this man looking after the interests of the state. But the power of the purse was really the point of, struggle between the collectivity and the governing power, centralized power. And then, king was not therefore determinant of the whole existence of the state. He was determined to some extent and comparatively free in decision of foreign policies, but in application of his the carrying out of administration, or in the executive side and official side, he had severe limitations. And fight for democracy centered around the sovereignty. Sovereignty consisted in legislative power, and legislative power will depend upon the man who has got money of the state. So sovereignty ultimately comes to, power over the purse. And it is there you find that real sovereignty resides in capacity to dispose of, the purse of the state. And England fixed this point as the point of struggle between the state authority. And England, for the first time, solved this problem by asserting the right of collectivity to dispose of the purse. And automatically the power of the king was always afterwards restricted. And all over the world, that part became accepted, that if collectivity is to become self-conscious, it must get its sovereignty. Sovereignty means power over the purse. So that expenses and, the expenditure and collection of taxes must depend upon the legislative power of the state. State must decide, the people must decide what they are going to gather and how they are going to distribute what they gather. You see? This power was the central force, and not only free sovereign foreign policy was not the central point. There you find several times, then it passed through the throne, the aristocracy, bourgeoisie, and the people. That is how it is going, the sovereignty. If you watch, it has passed from the king to aristocracy, from there to bourgeoisie, from bourgeoisie to the people. This sovereignty power over the purse, you see. And this he tries to show that in England this happened because of the power of taxes and king's right to collect the tax. In France, the same thing, because the king refused to tax the aristocracy who were rich, and the church and clergy who were also enormously rich. And the whole burden of taxation fell on the common man. And one of the principal causes and basic, the cause of French Revolution was this inequality. That the aristocracy and the clergy were left out, the richest and the most powerful interests of the state, and the common man was subjected to pay the taxes. That was the basic cause, one of the basic causes of the French Revolution. So the administrative side has three parts: financial, executive, and official. And the centralizing tendency takes place along these lines, you see, when the nation unit is formed. So in chapter 21, you come to legislative and social centralizing and uniformity.
Is that 20 or 21?
21 now. Yes. Powers of administration are not complete unless judicial power, power to make laws, you see, is also taken up as part of administration. Administration of a state is not complete only when collection of taxes is done for the matter. You see, economic is no financial is the moot point of sovereignty decides, but it is not complete till judicial, administration also is taken up and centralized, because it's necessary for law and order, to keep the existence of the state, or to keep the safety of property and person. Unless and until a judiciary comes into existence which protects the citizen against injustice or against violence and so on, law and order is necessary part over and above financial, power of the purse and power of judicature, power of justice, power of doing, well, maintaining law and order by enacting laws. In ancient times, this also was of customary character. There was no set order, no judiciary, you see, the promulgation of law was not there as a code. Code did not exist in ancient times. The jury system, the panchayat system, the guild, for instance, they decided. They without anything written or without any law, you see. In Rome and Athens also, the same system of justice presided, you see, and what? A jury was created by lot, you know that. Sometimes they cast lot and people, it was very strange. If you read the evolution of judiciary, it's very remarkable. You see how sometimes the collective instinct was capable of injustice, by maneuvering the whole thing. But they could do injustice also. It was customary, the law of custom rather than law which was accepted by people, understood and interpreted by jury, by somebody who specially belonged to that. Because some of the laws were not state laws, some of the laws were religious laws. And then they had to be interpreted by either by the clergy or the Brahmin or the ulema or the priest. He had to be called in to say whether this is right, isn't it? That's how Christ was killed. Christ was crucified because of the prevailing religious law among the Jews. It was not Roman law. It was not state law. So he points out that the state is not supreme in certain departments of legislation. State has to yield to a religious authority and religious law, which is the only custom, which only comes because people have been living like that or believing like that or behaving like that. There was not uniformity at that time. When state came, then unity in authority and uniformity in law. One authority and uniform law for all. That comes when, it was bound to come when the state idea became fixed in the collective life. Because there were religious laws before, and even now in the formation of present set of laws, religious laws in a society limit the operation of the state as a sovereign power. State is not allowed to legislate on these matters, so that the absolute sovereignty of the state is limited by religious laws prevalent in the society. And that's a king was there as an authority. You say, yes, king could not do what he wanted to. King had only to carry out what the religion had to say. King was only the channel for carrying out the custom. Pontiff Pilate actually argued with those people. And they wouldn't listen, say, but you are here to carry out our law. You have no legislative power, you see. This is our law, you have to carry it out. Well, king was only there for a channel and not the origin of this authority, you see, all authority. That is why theocratic states were there in which the church and the Brahmin and the ulema, the Muslims had a certain say in the matter, you see. And in the evolution from organic to rational society, the transition from organic to rational society is effected by creation of the state. State is the indispensable stage from when the society or collectivity is passing from organic to transition from organic to rational. And judicial power of the state were restricted in certain states like England. Even power of the state is not allowed to such powerful, tradition is created. It is more powerful than a written law. You see, a king cannot marry whom he likes. It's no joke. And there is no law to say that. Remember, nobody says that the king has no right and so on. Nothing. And still, you see, it is unwritten. But judicial power of the state were restricted very strongly, first in England, by the jury system and creation of an independent judiciary. By the jury system also they secured that state would not be able to do, the jury would say, and the majority of the jury, so it might be against what the state might have decided. Whether certain thing taken up by the state is right or not. Well, if the jury is called, jury can at once say no or yes, and the state might have said whatever it liked. It didn't matter. You see, so that it restricted the power of the state by creation of a judiciary, by the jury system and an independent judiciary. Indeed, there the parliament has no right over judicature. No judge can be removed by any executive force. Nothing. It is one of the strongest institutions in the world in that respect, and it is that which has been imitated in many democracies. This independence of the judiciary. The judiciary must be independent of the executive power and the legislative power. Because if that comes in, then naturally power of the state becomes absolute. But here you find that power of the state, whatever it is restricted. Now this first sign that the connective life is passing from this organic state to rational is a sign that it creates a constitution for itself. When a constitution is created, it means now the collectivity has become self-conscious. Means it is prevailing over custom now. No custom will do. There is a written law and you have to simply act by that law. You can interpret it, but you can't bring in the force of custom to abrogate the constitution. The code and the constitution, creation of a code and the writing of a constitution are a sign that the collective life is passed or has passed from, well, the organic to the rational stage. Because before that everything was floating and unwritten, you see, uncertain, vague. And now a strict formulation of code and uniformity has come into being. It is a Shastra which, when it becomes strict, unwritten law, and then it stereotypes the society and does not rationalize it. Fixed constitution creates uniformity. And this uniformity in civil life comes to creation of or writing of criminal law. Society as a conscious authority finds out what is a crime. You see, it is a decision of the collective consciousness to define crime, you see. That comes out of this uniformity, because it's not crime, it's not one man, two men, it is uniform to everybody. Self-conscious uniform ordering of its whole life by reason, that is the drive now, and that is what socialism comes to. Socialism comes to this. And quarrel might swing round the point, who is the state? King, theocracy, aristocracy, who? And history has led to this, belief or this truth that democratic form of the state is best out of the bad lot, so to say. Administration is only the regulation of the outward life of the people. Administration. It represents, though not embodies, the will and reason of the people. This outer administrative laws, constitution that you pass, or the machinery that is set up, looks as if it is mechanical. But it represents, it is not full embodiment of the race consciousness, no, national consciousness or collective consciousness. It's only, it represents its will and represents its reason. And then I quote his sentence because it is a judgment on what is democracy and on its limits. Certainly the democracy is, as it is now practiced, is not the last or penultimate stage that is in the collective evolution of constitution. For it is often merely democratic in appearance. Present democracy is not the last word because it is democratic in appearance. And even at the best amounts to the rule of the majority, not rule of all, rule of the majority, and works by the vicious method of party organization or party government. Defects, the increasing perception of which enters largely into present-day dissatisfaction of parliamentary system. People all over are dissatisfied with the parliamentary system because these defects are coming to light to their view now, they feel. And then he goes further, but it is necessary board. You cannot reject democracy as it stands because there is nothing better substitute. Therefore, he says it's a necessary broad standing ground upon which the self-conscious consciousness of the social being can come to its own. It will then demand the awakening of self-consciousness in all the members. Then it can come to its own if true democracy comes to being, is it not? True democracy must necessarily follow if this process goes on. But, again his prognosis, before a true democracy can be established, the process is likely to be overtaken by a prematurely socialistic endeavor, which actually has happened. And that was 40 years back. Before a true democracy can be established, the process is likely to be overtaken by a prematurely socialistic endeavor. Legislation is not something external. Law is not something from outside. It is from the conscience of the collectivity. It rises from somewhere. It may be wrong, it may be from a wrong root, but it is not something, that is outside the human consciousness. Therefore, he points out that law is not something external merely. Law and institution of a society are the framework which it builds, which society or collectivity builds for its life and carrying out of its dharma, the function, you see. It is the framework, it is a framework built for it to build up its life, to grow into it. That is to say, self-conscious regulation of social and cultural life. A self-conscious regulation of social and cultural life, that is the driving idea today, and that is the dream of the utopia. That is the dream of a utopia. One individual, he says, cannot determine the social life of the whole collectivity. He cannot determine the economic life. He can only watch and help in the evolution of collective life. He cannot determine the religious life, one individual. He cannot determine the national culture, the direction that it will take. What one can do, who identifies himself with the collective consciousness is to watch and help. That he can do. More he should not attempt. Even the very strongest can only fix certain new institutions which the time requires. You see? And helps the best in the collectivity to emerge. The rationale of absolutism and aristocratic form and theocratic form and the other forms that have gone out is that their idea was that average man was incapable of thinking for himself as to and find out what is good for him. That was the logic and that was some truth in it. But now when the man has become conscious, yes. This is now not real because the awakening has taken place. And the need is to enlighten the masses more and more. Need is not to give from outside. Enlighten the masses. They could be ruled. They could rule the outside, those dictators, theocratic rulers, or aristocratic leaders or dictators. They can rule from outside. They cannot lay hold on the soul of the race. That will always escape. And after 20 years, 15 years, 5 years of tyranny, the collective consciousness will rise in revolt. Or it will die down of its own, stagnation and decay, slow decay. Two ways in which this absolute authority generally dies out is a revolt of the conscience of the collectivity, social conscience, one, or a slow decay from within, which eats away the vital capacity of the state. So that what it does for some time is that it leaves very strong, dictatorial power by restriction or, crushing down of free thought, free speech, and free association. And positively, what it tries to do is to control religious life and the state rule and artificial monstrosity, to think that the state could permanently go on ruling for all time, as it is considered by one authority or one man or one group, even a group of people. It is impossible, is it? For the collective authority to take up the role of God, so to say, making things eternally and forever, is something that should not happen, is it? However great the man may be, he cannot foresee the line of growth of the collectivity in all departments of social life. It's impossible. And they fail by inner decay or by outer revolt, you see, because oppressed consciousness revolts after all. But still they have played their part. These absolute powers, absolute democracy or dictatorship had something to say. And he, on the contrary, points out that absolute monarchy or absolute dictatorship is really the parent of today's absolutely socialistic state idea. State socialism to be absolute, well, it's only legitimate parent of absolute monarchy and absolute powers that were exercised by people in the past. The same thing. And democracy may be able to organize, rationalize the life of the whole collectivity, in which consists modern progress. Modern progress consists in democracy being more and more able to organize rationally, not by compulsion, the life of collectivity. Unity and uniformity are its principal trend. And here also you can see that this life which is being tackled by this collective self-consciousness is vast, profound, the multiple life of the race, you see. It is practically, unimaginably vast, incalculable. And the effort of these organizations is to tackle that life. Life in the mass, life in the collectivity is vague, vast, profound, incalculable. The effort of the state, either democratic or socialistic, is to tackle this life, collective life, and to calculate, manage, reduce it to manageable, proportions by use of logical reasoning. And when we say socialism, it is this which is being attempted by socialism. Uniformity of social and economic principles and processes that govern the collectivity, secured by means of a fundamental equality of all, and the management of the whole social, economic life in all parts of the state. Uniformity of culture by process of state education organized upon scientific lines to regularize, to maintain the whole unified and uniform organized government and administration that will represent and well, act for the whole social being. Not only represent, but act for the whole social being. This is the modern utopia and modern idea of perfect society. Science will replace the large and obscure processes of nature and bring about perfection, or at least some approach to perfection in collective human life. If reason is allowed to dictate and organize a self-conscious life of the collectivity, then this uniformity of social life, economic life, based on the principle of unity and uniformity, trying to take hold of the social and economic life, cultural life, take education, and apply science to collective life, and try to create a regular, self-conscious effort at perfection. Well, it might succeed if it constantly applies self-conscious reason or logic to its movement and its organization. That brings us to the end of chapter 21, I think. Is it not? Was it not 21?
Yeah.
Yes. We take up 22 afterwards. That brings us to the end of chapter 21, I think. Is it not? Was it not 21?
Yeah.
Yes. We take up 22 afterwards. He has taken up the financial side, he has taken up the administrative side, he has taken up the legislative side, and shown that the drive is towards uniformity and centralizing. And that has its advantages and good point. And that represents to some extent the movement of consciousness of the collectivity. The consciousness of the collectivity, when it is governed by reason, self-conscious reason, then, well, if the whole mass can become capable of that self-conscious reasoning, it is certainly possible to create a nearly perfect society, not a perfect, but as perfect as possible, by taking advantage of scientific progress. The problem would be how to educate the masses to that degree of rationality so that they might be able to see, irrespective of their subconscious impulses, interests, desires, selfishness, pride, egoism, only judge rationally. Well, in that case, it is possible to create a perfect approach to perfection in collective life by a self-conscious organization of reason applied to the solution of collective problems. It is a gradually rising degree of consciousness. What he wants to point out to us is that in the organization of collective life, there is a growth of consciousness. And in the growth of consciousness, application of powers of psychology, which are higher than powers of vitality. The vital being of man is full of desire, full of impulses and selfishness. When the collective life moves out from there and stands on or tries to act on self-conscious reason, it's a development. You follow? This has a very organic connection to his whole outlook. What I am trying to point out is that this is not a study in sociology or politics. This is prognostication or reading of the growth of collective life on earth. And he is trying to show that growth has been taking place from inconscious to a greater and greater degree of consciousness. Even in collectivity, that process is on. And now, when we come to the end, you will see that he is trying to point out that not only rational but a supra-rational principle of collective life is also possible. He will point out further chapters that reason has its limits, and rational application will come to a point where it will find now we cannot go further. Then it will be necessary to think whether supra-rational reality can be embodied in collective life. Now we are trying to create a collectivity based upon reason, but reason will come to realize its limits, and when reason has seen its limits, it will be time for human spirit to think that collectivity also must have or must embody higher than mental consciousness, higher than rational consciousness. You understand? This is how it is organically related to his, the vision of life divine on earth. That life divine also will do collective life divine, not only individual life divine.
If you were going to teach this to the masses, though, wouldn't you have to, if you're going to teach it in the colleges, wouldn't you have to go through either socialism or political science? There has to be some field or some course of study or some category.
Well, you can put the books itself for study if that's they can put the human ideal of human unity and human cycle for study and then go about it.
But it would be in the department of either political science
Yes,
or sociology or even in psychology.
Oh yes, it could be.
But it would have to go through those departments even though it's more than that.
Yes. No, point is that we are not studying for the sake of politics.
No, I know.
We are studying this question as an evolution of collective life. And then, what are the elements that are at the back of this movement of collective life? That is what we are studying. And he is pointing out that gradually the collective consciousness not only is organizing greater and greater groups, larger and larger bodies of man, but they are moving out from instinctive life, vital life, life of interest, commonality, from there and custom and organic and natural life into reason, rational life in the collective life. And time will come when man will have to feel the need of outgrowing this rational and logical consciousness as a guiding force in his collective life. He will require a greater force to organize because he will feel that perfection cannot come fully till he outgrows his limit. And when he has outgrown the limit, then he will see the possibility of organizing collective life around not reason, but round a divine spirit, round a divine spark in man. Then the problem will be not how to make the people happy, but how to fulfill them. The fulfillment will be by expression of the inner divine reality of man, the inner divine soul of man. For that, then this collective life will have to see how to organize the life of the collectivity, administrative, judicial, educational, cultural, political, all life around the realization of this divine spark in man and its fulfillment and expression in life.
I wonder if there would be a college that would be willing to let you give a course in providing you'd be willing in this ideal of human unity. And
yes, we can lecture for.
Switzerland. In Switzerland, they have a college there in the Sudan where they study parapsychology and supernatural consciousness, and they are working hard at it in Switzerland. There's a college where they give degrees in that. You might find yourself.
No, there'd be an opportunity in the United States
because we're putting
chance here.
We're putting the mind at the present time. The mind is the end,
Yes, but he shows that how.
You have to be educated beyond that.
Yes, no, but how far mind can go has to be understood, and even that must be intelligently done.
It hasn't even dawned on us that there's something beyond the mind that is.
No, even they have not understood what is at work.
Right.
The best leaders have not realized what is at work. They are so much taken up with immediate problems that they don't think that the whole thing is now how to rationalize the masses. Even if you succeed in doing that, you will be helping in coming up the supra-rational, because that is the way in which it is done. The larger application of one principle makes the evolution of the next one easy. But the leaders don't realize it. They are only, we have to do this. This is plan and this is our program. What is the plan? Plan is to rationalize man. Plan is to make the man conscious. That is the plan. That's really to be done. The man in the street, the ordinary man, must be made to feel the responsibility of what a right means, what a vote means. He doesn't know.
Do you happen to know the name of the native, the Indian that has become now an American citizen, who is the representative in Congress from Bakersfield? Do any of you know his name?
Yes, one Sikh.
All right. Now, he is on the Appropriations Committee for foreign aid. And he has gotten over a point of getting it to the people so it doesn't go into the corrupt organization. I think you could get a reception in Washington. They're just about, I think, to establish a Department of Culture, which we have not had. All the time you were talking, it just kept pouring in. I think you can. I think Singh.
Well, Singh might have his own difficulties or his own problems. I don't know.
He's so well accepted. I saw him on a panel, and they showed him deference. They really did.
Who's that Singh?
Yeah, from Bakersfield.
He is from San Diego side.
Yes.
From that side.
And he really has gotten the point over till the whole program is being switched more in his, he didn't say too much, but he just kept barreling in until now there is a recognition, and the whole policy is commencing to say, we must see this gets to the people and not to the governments. The people must do something. So I don't know, but it's another one of those things to think about.
But how to get at Singh, I don't know.
Well, to Bobby Kennedy is who I send it to.
Well, the other Kennedy too. Also, perhaps the one about that's down there that belongs to you that somebody left, and that I would have about what is it, the mind of light or something like that. The first of it is about the physical, the development of the physical, and Kennedy has recently expressed great dismay about the physical condition of our children.
But I suppose some of it would be the timing, wouldn't it? That is when the time is right. Right. When the time is right.
Well, time is right when somebody makes up his mind. You see,
Well, this is better.
you see, the time depends upon the individual who awakens and he begins.
Well,
Then the time begins to change. You see, time doesn't come from like that from people, because they are unconscious or half conscious or only taken up with the immediate and the present. Somebody who sees the problem now, as he saw 40 years back, now this is not today's writing.
No.
And how profound it is, you can see how much. I tell you, the whole study of Toynbee is a commentary on this great man's vision. It's a commentary, nothing else but application.
Well,
He can show you on a big field how these things are working out. That is his merit. Vast literature. He has got, volumes and volumes. This is the principle. You read these two small books and you say the whole history of man is compressed. And not only what has happened, what must happen. What future holds. Which Toynbee said now, we'll come to it when we come to the end of it, I'll show you. From Toynbee's own quotation, that he's a trans-rational, movement of history. Aurobindo calls it supra-rational and supramental, and he calls it trans-rational. That's the only difference. But he has had to admit the necessity of a trans-rational presence as a moving force of history.
Well, that's what I meant.
There is no greater application of Aurobindo's view than that.
By timing, that's what I meant. How many people have this realization?
Yes. Now that is you see that some people begin, then at one center, those who feel similarly come together. And that's how the time begins to change. You see? Well, then this time starts to change from there, and then it becomes a wider and wider circle till, as he said, islands of light are formed everywhere and they join together. Becomes a big continent afterwards.
Well, Sri Aurobindo, Dr. Chaudhary frequently lectures at church conferences and seminars. And I think the churches throughout America and Canada are working very hard on this problem and have been for years. And they're teaching in their cemeteries. They're teaching comparative religion and philosophy, and they're not teaching their creeds and doctrines in the Protestant church nearly as much as they are an overall survey of psychology and social and economic conditions and comparative philosophies. Now their students are being trained in modern thought and even modern forms of legislation. So I think that the churches themselves are coming towards this. And
Well, they should if they want to fulfill their true function.
All the same, at the Presbyterian, I think there's seminary in San Anselmo, I heard the dean say to one of the translators of the Dead Sea Scrolls who came over to talk to them, he just wrapped the whole Dead Sea Scrolls interpretation in a bottle and stuck it back in the cave and says, we have what we want. We know the interpretation. So some of them are broad, but this is a seminary where they're training, the training pastors. And they were just as tight as you ever saw. So the cracks are there, but the shell hasn't fallen off yet. And then the Baptist in the South took a definite stand on fundamentalism, word for word, everything. But this has just come out, just this last, just less than a month ago.
Isn't it? I mean, this is
Is
No, the tendencies are there to make them realize that old repetition will not do. They are also trying to feel that there is a modern need to be fulfilled if they want to be part of social life. And I think many of them are adapting themselves. Only the difficulty which I see is that it is not the uplifting movement which is always at work, but catering to, recreative tendency, collective recreation. Or you see,
repetition.
no, recreation. The church is, instead of elevation, what they do is you go there for a picnic, you go there and have a drama, all right, we'll collect some money, all right, have something outing, we do, everybody must contribute in church, but it is
pleasure mode.
more or less festival and recreation rather than, strenuous, effort at self-improvement or self-development or growth, you see. At least in some of them, that's what I have seen. The people who participate actively are only that next Sunday or Saturday, what are we going to do? Then all right, there will be a evening party or, we'll have a, what you call this, whether a buffet or something, and then the children will come and
Sell donuts.
yes, they all gather together and do something. Well, it's a more or less a play, recreation, and
I think the Unitarian Church might be one that would listen to lectures of this type.
I was told that at Beverly there is a Unitarian church which is very good and so on. At Beverly, I mean at Berkeley.
There's a good one in San Francisco too.
Yeah.
Berkeley.
When I was in San Francisco, I was told that at Berkeley there is one, and this gentleman who was Jew who invited me to his organization, the Zionist organization, he told me that they would be very much interested in. But if they call, then it's all right.
Well, the woman that printed the salvatory notices that I took to have printed there was Unitarian. And she said, gee, she'd love to come, but she's going to Japan, and they're going there for 2 years, and she'll be gone the day before. But I mean, the feeling is Unitarians are reaching out and broad.
But Purani, I think that there are many of these, there is an effort for all the different religions at these conferences, a serious effort, not just for festival sort of a recreation. I mean, they're really discussing the different points. I think there really is a serious effort.
Yes, because the pressure also is there.
Yeah.
I think you would enjoy Bishop Height because he's a very wide awake man and he's not letting people sit and go to sleep in their pews. He says you've got to do something about helping change society through the church and the union of the different factions of Protestants. He said we've got to unite and have unity. He's a far-sighted man. Some people don't think he's very spiritual, but his head isn't in the clouds. It's very much on the ground. And he's a very powerful driving force. He's bishop of California.
I see.
We were going to ask him if they'd like to have a course of sovereignty at their church. But
Yes,
I have to wait till they get
or
back.
is there what? Anything of collective life? Why?
Well, I have to wait.
Somebody, anything on collective life if they want. The ideal of collective life.
Well, he is substituting in the Salsalita this for the month of July.
Who is Bishop?
Yeah. And one reason this timing is pretty good. So when we get back, we'll see what we can do.
Well, if they want, I'm ready. I have no objection to speak to anybody.
No,
Mine is a rational stand, and I'll put my stand and say, yes, here it is.
To him till I knew what your schedule was. See, this is the point, is how much time you had. I didn't know what your schedule was from your San Francisco on.
Well, I don't know, except that I want to be in New York on the 1st of September. That's all I know.
There's not much time then, you say.
One might be able to get a few lectures in.
This community church down where they have classes is famous for its universal point of view.
Yes, there's the community church.
New York.
Yes, community church has fixed 3 days for me, 16th, 23rd and 30th of September. So I'm going to speak 3 days there. Yes.
The Church of John Haynes home, you know.
16th, 23rd, and when?
30th.
And now Donald Harrington is the minister.
I heard a lecture on atheism in that church. It's good.
What's the
Well,
They would speak of atheism in a church.
John Haynes home. And he's very definitely, and anyone there visited Gabby, you know, and so forth.
He's very.
Yes, Holmes is retired now, is he?
Yes, he's retired now.
Yes.
And Donald Harrington.
Yes.
who wrote
If
the-
I have time, I'll meet him. I
Yes,
don't mind
you
meeting.
will.
Yes. If I have time and if he is available, I'll
Yeah.
meet him. I don't mind meeting. Because I'm speaking that 3 days to
Yeah.
the study groups.
Yeah.
One is this crisis of culture.
Mhm.
Second is world unity. And third is a spiritual remedy.
That's what you're going to speak on?
Hmm.
Wonderful.
Well, I might just say this. I don't want to speak in it's maybe that you can take on part of and see it. But Dr. showed me
Episcopal church.
often, lectures
along
for these groups. And he went to Portland, up near Canada, up in the northwest. And he certainly could give you a great deal of information on what is going on in the cultural centers of the churches and the theological seminaries. He could give you, and Dr. Spiegelberg could too, because he
Yes.
taught in Berkeley and taught comparative religion for quite a few years in connection with the church and University of California.
You need to talk to some of our classes. When he was
Yes,
up there.
but I mean, he actually was in Berkeley in the midst of the theological colleges there. He taught there, so he would know, but that, I don't know, that must have been a few years back, see. But both those men, Dr. Spiegelberg,
Oh,
They would know.
somewhere.
what is going on, you see.
What were the titles of those lectures again? You're going to give me your.
Well, crisis of culture.
It was just this spring that Dr. Schluter went up to Portland.
Crisis of culture.
Oh, and second was world unity, unity of the world. And third was the spiritual remedy.
Wonderful titles.
I should say.
16th, 23rd and 30th.
There is one other question about how to reconcile these two statements. One statement was, no individual can determine the evolution of a free-thinking society.
Yes, the whole evolution, yes.
Yes, the other statement was, group life is always dragging behind the highest individual.
Yes.
Therefore, you have how do you reconcile those? How do you...
No, they don't lead. The individual who is forward goes forward on his own. He is speaking of the individual as leader of the group.
Yes.
Well, then he cannot determine their
He
evolution.
can't determine it. But
However great he may be, he cannot lay down all the financial and social and cultural movement and so on forth. That is not possible for one man to do. He can watch and he can guide, that he can do. But as an individual, he has every right to go forward. And the society has to, if it thinks this is worth imitation, well, then they will have to imitate him. You see, what he is doing, he is going on his own.
In this book of Creative Understanding, years ago I read this, but I haven't been able to look into it. But Count Heidelman gives a chapter on the mass mind, the unconsciousness in the mass mind. And he says, I remember this much, that the statesman is able to feel and weigh this mass conscious mind, whether he does it rationally or instinctively. And he brings forward what is there. And that he said that constitutes great statesmanship. It's not altogether rationalized. He knows when the mass is ready to act. And
Yes.
he works with that factor.
Yes, instinctively or intuitively. That is a sign of a statesman. You see, a sign of a statesman is not only to feel, but also what is coming, if he is really a great statesman. Not only how far he will take the people, that is one side of his knowledge, but also where to take. They are never ready.
Well, they don't.
They are never
can't
ready.
rationalize.
Yes, that's it. So, but he knows how far he will be able to carry them in what he sees to be worth doing or necessary to do to reach a great ideal. To reach a great ideal, he has a vision. And he knows that immediately I can't reach the whole of it. But 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps I can go. So what he does is to look at the masses and instinctively or intuitively feel how far they will bear the pressure. And he puts that much and carries them forward like that. But the problem today is, what Sherundo is pleading in this is, that the mass must become conscious. They must be trained. If democracy is to be real, each citizen must become rational to some extent in thinking about at least collective problems. He may have his own foibles, but in thinking of collective problems, he must become self-conscious and rational.
how can you do that?
Yeah, that is the work of the administration. That is the work of the state.
Yeah.
That is the work of the state.
Yeah, that's why I think rather than through the church, it's through the government.
Yes. Through education, through its even campaign for election. If they are true statesmen, in their elective campaigns they can do it. When they go out for election, the first thing they must do is to awaken the masses to reason. Not to ask only for vote for what he stands, but to show what he stands is irrational. Not interest and calculation only, but to say that decide on the basis of your consciousness and reason, not on the basis of interest. Now that campaign must be there. The state can even do while doing political propaganda. More it can do by education, certainly.
Well, pardon me, I don't know if all these were taken before, but in the last election, we had TV debates for the first time, and that is a point there. There was a definite attempt to bring issues before the public.
Yes, that's it. That's train the man in the state to decide. You see, you may bring also interest in New York. I have to be on the 1st in New York first, because
First of
that's
September in New York.
1st of September. Who came here, you can tell him that on page 188 and 201, there is reference to Manu if he wants to read something about Manu from Sri Aurobindo.
In what book?
Ideal of human unity.
You already brought it.
What is it that you found in literature?
No, Asian studies.
Oh, Asian studies. Mhm.
I get so excited every time. I do a human in there, I get fired. Yeah. If the election, depending on, who gets in this Department of, Education if one gets in, then we have an in politically, to try to get this, at the university level. If nobody gets in, we may not, so we have to wait and see till after the election when it's possible.
When you're talking about state universities, of course, I suppose they're the others.
Well, this is, see, the superintendent of education, if we can get, a hearing at this level, then this does a lot to pave the way for acceptance as a part of the curriculum studies of all of the either university or college levels. And this is what, we've been kind of waiting to see. Can't think until after the election.
Like California, probably just put it in if they wanted to.
There is latitude, yes, they've had the last, 2 or 3 years, there's been a great study of curriculum. And the recommendations, the book about this thick, and most of the educators have not read it. It's there for reference, but they still are staying with their old curriculum, although there's been quite a curriculum fight in California. Things are cracking.
Even in Arizona, they can introduce here in this university.
Did you talk to?
Well, I don't know to whom to approach, but it is possible to.
You need to speak in the university.
No, to
this
get
is part
sharing
of
those
textbook.
books introduced as text or as recommendation books.
You see, they teach marks.
Man like Brown can do it very easily if he wants to do. I mean, he has to get half a dozen persons to support him. They can do it. Then
You mean Governor Brown or this?
no,
Brown?
this gentleman who came here. He's in the educational line, so he can catch hold of somebody and ask him, why don't we try this thing? It's like that it gets undone, you see.
There's Dorothy Schilling at Tempe, I've written to her, hoping that you might lecture at the university at Tempe. But it was right at their graduation time. And of course, when we received the notice, she knows the lectures are going on here.
Well, even if we were only included in the list of recommended books in the curriculum, this would be help. And that ought to be able to get that in.
Well, I suggested one evening, and a good time to repeat this suggestion, that if anyone wishes to contribute a book to the library of universities, they will accept a book for free Aurobindo, and you may deduct it to the.
Which library is that?
Any
University.
Who would accept the donation of the book?
will accept the donation of a book of Sri Aurobindo, 2, 3, I think, any amount, I don't know. We sent 3 or 4 to Duke University because of Dr. Ryan being there, thought he might be interested.
You can
I
also,
knew someone there, I sent it through somebody that I knew, but then they send you a little notice saying that you have made this contribution, and you may also deduct it from your income tax, so that would be a way to spread the message.
another way it could be done, your public library will accept donations, particularly the American edition that has the Library of Congress registration of Aurobindo's works. But if this is done, then get your friends to come in and take the book out, because if it isn't used for a certain length of time, then they put it down below. But they will accept it too at the public
It
library
isn't being
level.
published here anymore,
No, but if you could get copies that had been published,
Yeah.
they're not doing any of it, yeah. Well, that registration in the Hall of Congress was a wonderful boost as far as acceptance. However, could you submit any book published someplace else?
I did.
And it gets, can it get recognition and a number in the Hall of Congress?
Oh, that, I don't know.
Well, that's important because a lot of people, at the student level,
I would think it would be only books published in America, but I don't know. You mean that Congress?
yes, a Library of Congress.
I read it.
Well, when you get back east, try to find out about that, because that's important as far as recognition and being used as referenced.
Library of Congress.
Yes, if it has this stamp, this recognition, this card, this number, then this means this is a certain status that is, people will accept it. Because a lot of us are, a lot of the public still want a status recognition. This is something that's safe to read, you know?
I was going to ask, Brian, they published some of Sri Aurobindo's books here and I think in New York, something called the Sri Aurobindo Library.
Yes, yes, I know. That second edition now is out, and I think after that the agreement has come to a termination.
And they have a new Aurobindo library now. We just received a notice of it in New York City. That other one, I think, doesn't exist anymore, that original one. But we just received a notice there is another Aurobindo library that started in New York. We just received a notice.
Mm-hmm. You know, I was in New York and I was looking for somebody who knew about Sri Aurobindo. And I went there on Wall Street. They had an address in the book, you know. There was no such address. There wasn't even any building there where the address was supposed to be. That's all.
It's been turned down, Rena.
Yes, it might have been.
How long ago was this now?
That was 1959.
Awful changes.
Yeah.
Last time I was there was a few years ago. I just didn't recognize it because it was important so much change.
Excuse me, but when I was looking up books on literature in the University of California Library, that was my first time that I knew anything about Sri Aurobindo because I came upon his magnificent volume of criticism of poetry, of English poetry.
Future poetry, you mean?
Yes.
Future poetry.
What a marvelous book. Why, this is the most wonderful book I ever read on poetry. When I went to the ashram and found out that this was more or less the home of Sri Aurobindo, I thought, well, this is marvelous.
Yes, future poetry is there. But more is his poems are there also, big volumes of his poems. Collected poems, 2 volumes and 2 epics. Helium and Savitri, yes, they might not be there still.
I didn't see them, and they weren't on the card list. They may have been, and they stacked away in the records.
She's speaking of the library, not the ashram, correct?
Yes, I know.
I know, but the library at the University of California, you think would have Savitri and the other poems on
I
the
don't.
reference card.
Well, they probably have a professor that can teach them, you see, and that will teach them, but they have this check, they have, I don't know whether it's a textbook or just kept as a reference book, but it's there, and I got it out. And I didn't know anything about it, I just thought it was just one little handbook.
There is a certain leeway, but there is a recommended list, and some of the professors will put in some of them. There's a choice, but many times it's again there's a system that you know they don't buck the head man on the totem pole. They're keeping their own status, and there's a strong movement that unless you become administrative, in other words, the good teachers are looked down on unless they have the ambition to become administrative, so that the whole thing needs to be cleaned up. And when it started in California, it started coming to the surface when they found out that they were burning the books. See, California printed their own books.
Oh, you mean the grammar school textbook?
No, well, yes, but I mean,
Yeah.
When this came out that they were
Yeah.
printing them, and burning them,
Uh-huh.
then this started the investigation of the whole thing.
Yeah, I remember that.
And there's been a lot of controversy, but there is a preference. You can use choice, but you do use choice within the recommended. This is too bad, but this is what it works. However, with this next administration, there will be a new principal of a new superintendent of schools, which is the first time for about 15 or 20 years.
Well, the superintendent of schools wouldn't affect the university.
Yes, he is. That's what they call the Department of Education. The head man on the totem pole for all the education in the state is called the superintendent of schools in Sacramento.
This
And-
relates only to California, not to all the.
This is only in California. That's no, just only in California. The Health, Welfare, and Education would be the department, and there's no Department of Culture as such, and this Department of Health, Welfare, and Education is rather recent. But gee, if we just get one state moving, it'd be a help.
I would think California would be a good state to start with, unless it would be perhaps New York or someone where it is.
I think California or New York, either one, are the two states that would probably be most willing to.
You know, a friend of ours is writing a thesis on Sri Aurobindo at the University of New York, I think it's called. Not quite sure what title. But at any rate, she's doing a thesis on Sri Aurobindo, and I would think, and with the counseling with her teacher, you see, and I would think that things like this, just these little things, would just help to bring an interest, you know, beginning interest.
And I noticed Dr. Sorokin is interested.
Who?
Dr. Sorokins of Harvard University.
Mm.
I noticed in the leaf of the book, he said something complimentary about Aurobindo. He's supposed to be some sort of an eminent sociologist, although they didn't pay much attention to him at University of California, Berkeley, because he was a little too unconventional or something.
How long ago was this? I mean, anything unconventional at the University of California, Berkeley is so well accepted. I wondered how long ago this was that Sorokin wasn't accepted there.
Well, I can't say exactly, but he wasn't accepted, but we didn't study him.
Oh.
And that was just 3 years ago or
Oh.
so.
Mhm.
I was doing graduate work.
Well, maybe they're becoming a little, because I know several years ago when who was the fellow plot on the page, you know, the vice president, Wallace. I couldn't remember his name. Oh, when he was there, the whole university was almost communist. I mean, when he was president, I mean, vice president at this time in
What university?
Berkeley. So maybe they've tapered down, but for a while there, anything that was unconventional was most accepted. That was a number of years ago.
Well, perhaps non-conventional in some ways, but non-conventional in something transcending the rational. That's something really new.
Yeah.
They might be an unconventional in accepting a socialistic way of thinking or something like that. But this sort of thing, this is a type of unconventionality that isn't in mode at all.
That's right. That's right.
Yes, that is difficult for the rational mind to adjust, and even Sorokin finds it difficult, I can tell you.
Yeah, I think so.
Sorokin is not out and out a man
No,
who
he's
understands Aurobindo. He doesn't understand Aurobindo, whatever else he might be.
But he comes closest, I
Yes,
imagine.
he has some ideas which he might have taken and put in his own name. I mean, I don't object to that, because in thought there is no proprietorship and you can't patent thought, so it's good. In any way, good thought made current by anybody is good. But that I know that he doesn't understand Aurobindo. That I have seen one or two of his writing, and I know he doesn't understand Aurobindo. Or he thinks that he understands more. I don't
read
know.
that too in this symposium that Dr. Chaudhary had, which is excellent in its way. But there's an article in there by Sorokin, which is rather intellectual and one-sided, and he's read a little bit of here and there. He's eclectic, and he doesn't really understand, or he can't reach to that height. Or he can't even reach to
Yes. These people, that is why I say that intellectuals have the least chance of development. Least chance, because they are hide bound with their intellectual theories and they have a position. And very difficult for them to find here is something which is worth trying. Oh, what they have is last word. Intellectual theory, philosophy, idea, or whatever it is, because intellectual, egoism is terrific. It is most difficult. It is sattvic because it is rational. It can give always reason to itself. It is not that it's insincere, but it is limited by its own, rational reason. That's all, and it can't say beyond. It can always have some arguments. Well, that is a business of mind, is it not? To take up a cause and plead for it. Yesterday, Brown was telling me that he doesn't believe in invasion of Aryans, from outside India. When he read in this sentence in my book, and he said, I agree with 10%, but all the scholars don't. They have taken a position 100 years back when they were imperialist, when they were ruling Asia and Africa. They have taken a position that as we have gone and conquered these people, so the Aryans must have come and conquered the non-Aryans. Now there is no proof for it. I challenge anyone, but they will not do it. They will go on writing cupboard full of books on their nonsense. You can't help it. Because whenever a mind has taken up a position, it can always find reason. This is Bergson's greatest discovery, which Europeans need not understand. Bergson proved it to the hilt that intellect is not an instrument of knowledge. It's an instrument for action. And it can take up any position and justify it. You take up the position that Aryans did not invade, you will find reason for it. If you take Aryans invade, you will find reason for it. So which is true? By reason you can never decide. And I challenge them to produce a material evidence. Material evidence against them. Mohenjo-daro produces a city. City life actually existed in Vedic times. That is Mohenjo-daro's find actually on material plane. Now where is the Aryans coming out? The Aryans were nomadic tribes wandering about with their cattle and so on. Well, here are cities made of stone. The cities existed in the region where Veda is supposed to be made or written. The material evidence is against their outlook. But they won't give up. See, the mind will never give up like that. So we have not to, in ashram we don't care for this thing. We never think they exist. That's all, finished. Because they are not going to change. So leave them aside. We say what we want to say and we give our reasons. Finish. We say what we want to say and give our reasons. Let them not accept. If this is true, it is going to come through. Finish. You cannot think of convincing